The evening should have been ordinary. I just finished my workout, the sweat still clinging to my skin as I stood in the kitchen, flipping through the mail. Bills, coupons, junk, nothing exciting. Then I saw it. A card, tucked innocuously between a flyer for gutter cleaning and a credit card offer. My name wasn't on it, but Lily's was. The envelope was cream, the edges embossed. Too elegant for a generic thank you card. I hesitated before opening it. Maybe it was personal, maybe it wasn't my place. But something about the handwriting on the front, unfamiliar and too intimate, sent a chill crawling up my spine. Inside, the words made my stomach drop. Last night was unforgettable. I can't stop thinking about you. Same time next week? No signature, no name. Just a single black heart doodled at the bottom. For a moment, I stood there frozen. The sound of the refrigerator humming in the background. Everything else silent. Couldn't mean what I thought it meant. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Someone could have sent it as a joke, right? But my mind was already spinning, pulling up moments from the past few months that I'd buried under excuses. The late-night outings, the sudden obsession with her appearance, the new lingerie she claimed was just for her. And now this. Lily walked into the kitchen just then, her hair damp from a shower, her phone in hand. She barely looked up. "Hey," she said, reaching for the fridge. "Did you grab the dry cleaning?" I held up the card, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What's this?" She froze, her hand hovering just inches from the refrigerator door. For a split second, her face was blank, unreadable. But then it changed, twisting into something I didn't recognize. "What the hell, Andrew?" she snapped, snatching the card from my hand. "You're going through my stuff now?" I blinked, stunned. "Going through your stuff?" "It was in the mail, Lily. What's going on?" She rolled her eyes, her laugh sharp and cold. "Oh my God. It's just a joke. Kim sent that. She thought it'd be funny after our girls' night." "You're so dramatic." I stared at her, searching for any hint of truth in her words. But she didn't meet my eyes, and her grip on the card was so tight her knuckles turned white. "Kim sent this?" I asked, my voice quieter now but firmer. "Lily, don't lie to me." Her eyes flickered just for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Yes, Andrew. Kim. What? Do you think I'm sneaking around behind your back?" She scoffed and turned away, tossing the card onto the counter like it was trash. "Honestly, you're being ridiculous." But as she walked out of the kitchen, her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and her lips twitched into the smallest of smiles. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But I wasn't letting this go. I waited until she was out of sight before I reached for her phone, still unlocked and sitting precariously close to the edge of the counter. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, each ding of a new notification setting my teeth on edge. And then I saw it. A thread buried beneath dozens of others, saved under a contact name, so generic it almost slipped past me. "Work." The last message was sent just 20 minutes ago. "Can't wait to see you again, babe." My chest tightened, my vision blurring at the edges. I didn't know how to breathe, how to think, how to move. All I knew was that this wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. And it was just the beginning. I didn't confront her immediately. As much as I wanted to storm into the living room, phone in hand, and demand answers, I knew better. I needed more than one text message and a suspicious card. I needed the whole picture. So I played it cool. I slipped her phone back onto the counter and walked into the living room as if nothing was wrong. Lily was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone with the same nonchalance she'd always had. But now, every movement, every flick of her finger across the screen, felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. "Movie tonight?" I asked casually, leaning on the doorway. She glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting mine. "I'm tired. Long day. Rain check." Of course. Another rain check. Another excuse. I nodded and smiled, but inside, I was already planning my next move. That night, while Lily slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake, replaying every interaction we'd had over the past year. Her sudden disinterest in our plans, the endless excuses, the late-night work calls. How had I been so blind? How had I let this slip right past me? But the questions didn't matter. What mattered was finding the truth. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Lily left around 8 a.m., dressed in a fitted blazer and pencil skirt that made her look more like she was heading to a high-stakes negotiation than the office. "Don't wait up," she said as she kissed me on the cheek, a gesture that now felt like an insult. "I might be late. Busy day. Busy day." Sure. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I was in motion. Her laptop was still on the desk in the study, the password one I knew by heart, the name of her childhood dog and her birth year. She wasn't exactly creative. Emails, calendar events, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I opened her messages, synced conveniently to her laptop. And there it was, a thread with someone named Daniel. The first message was innocuous enough. "Meeting went well. Thanks for the tip." But the deeper I scrolled, the worse it got. Inside jokes, flirty banter, emojis she hadn't used with me in years. And then the photos. Her, in a dress I didn't recognize, posing in what was unmistakably a hotel room. Him, shirtless, with a grin that made my stomach churn. My hands shook as I clicked through, each image a nail in the coffin of our marriage. But the worst was the video, just a few seconds long, sent the night before. Lily laughing as Daniel twirled her around in what looked like a fancy restaurant. Her voice rang out, clear as day. "You make me feel alive again. Alive again." I slammed the laptop shut, my breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the air was too thick to breathe. My wife wasn't just lying to me. She was living an entirely different life. But instead of breaking down, I forced myself to think clearly. If she wanted to play games, I'd show her I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I grabbed my phone and texted a buddy of mine, Jake, who worked as a private investigator. "I need a favor. Discreet." Jake responded almost instantly, "Name it." By the time Lily returned home that evening, cheerful and glowing from her so-called busy day, I had a plan. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Lily came through the door that night with the kind of energy that didn't belong to someone who just slogged through a long day at work. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she carried herself like someone who just stepped out of a glossy magazine spread. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag on the counter and slipping off her heels. "Dinner yet?" "No," I replied flatly, my eyes fixed on her. She paused for a second, like she was testing the waters. "Well, I'm starving. Want me to order something?" I didn't answer. My silence hung heavy in the air. She felt it. Anyone would have. And for a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. Nervousness? Guilt? It was gone before I could be sure. "Rough day?" she asked, her tone overly casual. "Yeah," I said, standing up. "Rough day." She didn't ask why. She never asked why anymore. Instead, she wandered into the living room, scrolling on her phone like nothing had changed. Jake's text buzzed in my pocket. "Got her. Couple of pics from today. Sending now." I stepped outside onto the back patio before opening the message. The first photo hit me like a sledgehammer. Lily and Daniel, sitting together at a small cafe, their heads close, her hand resting on his. The second was worse. They were kissing, right there in broad daylight, like they didn't have a care in the world. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago. I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug into my palm. My mind raced, torn between marching back inside and confronting her, and holding my ground, waiting until I had the upper hand. But then the door opened behind me. "Who are you texting?" Lily's voice was light, but there was a sharpness beneath it. I turned to face her, my phone still in my hand. "Work stuff," I lied smoothly, slipping it into my pocket. "What about you? Busy day?" She blinked, her smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "Yeah, non-stop meetings. You know how it is." I nodded, my face a mask. "Oh, I know exactly how it is." Her phone buzzed then, and she glanced at it, her expression instantly softening. She turned away slightly, but not before I caught the name on her screen. "Daniel." "Work?" I asked, my voice laced with venom I couldn't quite hide. "Huh." She looked up, startled, then quickly shoved her phone into her pocket. "Yeah, just an update for tomorrow." Her lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a second, I almost admired her audacity. But I was done playing dumb. You know, I said, stepping closer. It's funny. Jake mentioned seeing you today. Her head snapped up. Jake? Your friend Jake? Yeah, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. He was downtown. Said he saw you at some cafe. Guess those meetings must have wrapped up early, huh? Her face went pale. What are you talking about? She stammered. I wasn't at a cafe. Jake must have been mistaken. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Mistaken? Funny, because he sent me pictures. Her breath hitched, her eyes darting toward the door like she was calculating her escape route. Andrew, you're being ridiculous. Jake must be messing with you or something. You know how he is. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos, holding them out for her to see. Does this look like he's messing with me? She froze, her eyes wide as they flicked to the screen. For a moment, she said nothing, her chest rising and falling as her mind raced for an explanation. Then she laughed. An unsteady, desperate sound. Oh, come on, Andrew. Are you seriously spying on me now? This is crazy. Crazy. My voice rose, my anger bubbling to the surface. What's crazy is you sneaking around with some guy while lying to my face. Who is he, Lily? How long has this been going on? Her expression hardened, the guilt vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. You know what? I don't have to stand here and justify myself to you, she snapped, her voice rising to match mine. Maybe if you weren't so paranoid all the time, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Paranoid. That was her angle. Turn it around on me. Make me the bad guy. You think I'm paranoid? I said, my voice shaking with fury. You think I don't see what's right in front of me? I gave you everything, Lily. I trusted you. And maybe that's the problem. She shot back, her voice cold as ice. Maybe I needed more than what you were giving. Her words hit me like a slap, but before I could respond, she grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. Where are you going? I demanded. Out, she said without looking back. I need some air. The door slammed behind her, leaving me standing in the empty house, her words echoing in my head. Maybe I needed more than what you were giving. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lily didn't come back that night. The clock ticked past midnight, the house eerily silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. I sat in the living room, my jaw tight, fists clenched, replaying our argument over and over in my head. Her words echoed, slicing through my composure like glass shards. Maybe I needed more than what you were giving. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was her complete lack of remorse, the way she turned everything around to make me feel small, inadequate. I'd spent years giving her everything I could. Time, effort, love, and in return, she'd handed me lies wrapped in disdain. But this was no time to wallow. If she thought she could slip out and return with another flimsy excuse, she was wrong. This time I was waiting for her. At 2:18 a.m., the headlights of her car lit up the driveway. I stayed seated, watching her shadow move across the hallway window. The front door creaked open, and there she was, walking in like nothing had happened. Heels in hand, her makeup smudged but her expression smug, like she'd already rehearsed the next round of lies. Late night, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. She froze mid-step, her eyes darting to me. For a moment, surprise flashed across her face before she masked it with indifference. Couldn't sleep, she said, brushing past me toward the kitchen. Went for a drive. A drive, I said, standing now. My body felt rigid, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Where'd you go? You know? Just so I can stop being paranoid. She set her heels down on the floor with a loud clack, then turned to face me. I don't owe you a play-by-play of my night, Andrew. I stepped closer, my hands trembling with barely contained anger. No, but you owe me the truth. Who is he, Lily? How long has this been going on? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Oh my God. Are we seriously doing this again? I told you, there's no one else. Then explain the photos, Lily. I snapped, pulling out my phone and holding it up for her to see. Explain why Jake saw you at a cafe with Daniel. Explain why you're lying to my face right now. Her face twisted into something ugly. Part anger, part fear, part defiance. You had your friend spying on me? Are you kidding me? That's psychotic, Andrew. Do you even hear yourself? Don't turn this on me. I growled, my voice rising. I wouldn't have to ask Jake for help if you weren't sneaking around like this. So stop lying and tell me the truth. She glared at me, her chest heaving, her jaw tight. For a moment, I thought she was going to keep up the act. But then, something shifted in her eyes. An icy resolve that made my stomach turn. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with venom. You want the truth? Daniel makes me feel alive, Andrew. He's fun, he's exciting, he listens to me. Things you stopped doing a long time ago. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, each one sinking deeper than the last. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my thoughts scrambled. She didn't even look guilty. She looked triumphant, like she'd been waiting to throw this in my face. You disgust me, I said through gritted teeth. She crossed her arms, unfazed. And you bore me. The silence that followed was deafening. My hands shook at my sides, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. For a moment, I didn't know what I was going to do. Yell, cry, leave. But then, something clicked. Good, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm glad you said that. Her brows furrowed, her smugness faltering for the first time. What are you talking about? I stepped back and reached into the drawer of the side table, pulling out a folder. You see, while you were out with your lover tonight, I had some paperwork drawn up. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. She stared at it, her confidence cracking as she hesitated to open it. What is this? She asked, her voice losing some of its edge. Divorce papers, I said simply. Her face went pale, her bravado crumbling. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? I snapped. Pack your things, Lily. This marriage is over. For the first time, she seemed truly shaken. She opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the documents. When she looked back at me, there was something close to panic in her expression. You can't be serious, she said, her voice a whisper. Oh, I'm serious, I replied. You made your choice, Lily. Now, I'm making mine. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. For once, she didn't have an excuse or a clever comeback. And for the first time in months, I felt a spark of control return to me. It wasn't over yet, but the tables had turned. Lily stood there, clutching the divorce papers, her face pale and her hands trembling. The confidence, the defiance, all of it had drained from her in an instant. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something real. Fear. She swallowed hard, her voice a shaky whisper. Andrew, we don't have to do this. Let's just talk. Talk, I said, my voice cold and steady. Now you want to talk? After months of lies? After what you just said to me? Her eyes darted to the papers again, then back to me. She was scrambling, her mind racing to figure out how to regain control of the situation. It's not what you think, she said, her tone soft, almost pleading. Daniel, he doesn't mean anything. It was stupid. A mistake. I laughed bitterly, crossing my arms. A mistake? You don't call months of sneaking around a mistake, Lily. You call it what it is. A choice. And you made yours. She took a step closer, her voice gaining a desperate edge. But I chose you, Andrew. I'm here, aren't I? I didn't leave. That has to mean something. I stared at her, my stomach churning. Her words, her tone. It was all so carefully crafted, so manipulative. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. It means nothing, I said flatly. You stayed because you didn't think I'd find out, because you wanted the best of both worlds. The comfort of this house, of me, and the thrill of whatever the hell you were doing with him. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her shoulders stiffening. The pleading expression melted away, replaced by something colder. You don't understand, Andrew, she said, her voice low. You think this is black and white, but it's not. Do you know how lonely I've been? How invisible you've made me feel? Invisible. I snapped, my temper flaring. You're blaming this on me now? On what work? The fact that I've been killing myself to give us a good life? Do you even hear yourself? You weren't there, she shot back, her voice rising. You were always at the office or glued to your laptop. And when you were home, you were too exhausted to care. Daniel? Don't. I cut in, my voice sharp. Don't you dare say his name to me. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment we just stared at each other, the tension so thick it felt like the room itself might collapse. Finally, she looked away, her arms folding defensively across her chest. So that's it then? She said, her voice laced with bitterness. You're throwing away everything we've built over one mistake? One mistake, I repeated, my voice incredulous. Lily, this wasn't a one-time slip-up. This was deliberate, calculated. You lied to my face for months, and you think you're the victim here. She didn't respond. She just stood there, glaring at me, her breathing heavy. I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I said finally, my tone calm but firm. You can take whatever you want, but I don't want to see you here after Friday. I'll have my lawyer handle the rest. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face again. Wait, she said, stepping closer. Andrew, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll end it with him. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. But her words rang hollow. The sincerity she was trying to muster felt like an act. One last attempt to manipulate me into forgiving her, into letting her stay. There is no us, Lily, I said, my voice heavy with finality. Not anymore. For a moment, she looked like she might argue again. But then her shoulders slumped, and her expression crumbled. She sank into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt, or whatever semblance of it she might actually feel. Upstairs, I closed the door to the bedroom and leaned against it, my chest heaving. My heart was racing, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, relief. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life turning out. But it was the first time in months that I felt like I could finally breathe. Downstairs, the sound of Lily's quiet sobs drifted up the stairs. I ignored them. I'd given her every chance, every opportunity to come clean, to choose me, and she'd thrown it all away. She made her bed. Now she could lie in it. The morning after our confrontation, Lily was still in the house. I woke up to the sound of her pacing downstairs, her voice low and sharp as she muttered into her phone. I didn't have to guess who she was talking to. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my jaw stiff from clenching all night. The events of the previous evening played in an endless loop in my mind. Each word, each look cutting deeper than the last. But as I stood there, pulling on a hoodie and jeans, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her dictate how this ended. When I went downstairs, she was sitting at the kitchen counter, her hair pulled into a messy bun, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up as I entered, her face blank, her eyes calculating. "Morning," she said, her voice devoid of its usual edge. I ignored her, walking past to grab my own coffee. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she spoke again. "So, what happens now?" I turned to face her, my eyes narrowing. "What happens now is you pack your things and leave." She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to hold my ground. "Andrew, be reasonable. This is our house. I'm not just going to walk away from everything." "Our house," I echoed, setting my mug down with a thud. "You lost the right to call it that the moment you decided to sneak around behind my back." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her composure cracking just slightly. "I told you I was sorry. I told you it was a mistake. Why can't we move past this?" "Because you didn't just betray me, Lily," I said, my voice cold. "You humiliated me. You lied to my face over and over. You don't get to sit here and pretend like we can go back to normal." Her jaw tightened, and I could see the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "You think you're so perfect?" she snapped suddenly. "You think you never made mistakes in this marriage?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You're unbelievable. You really can't take responsibility for anything, can you? This isn't about me, Lily. This is about you and the choices you made." Her face twisted with anger, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, and her expression faltered. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice sharp. None of your business, she shot back, grabbing the phone and turning away. I stepped closer, my patience wearing thin. Still texting him, huh? After everything, you still can't let him go. She whirled around, her eyes blazing. You don't get to control who I talk to. No, I said, my voice rising. But I do get to control what happens in my house. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you keep doing this under my roof, you're out of your mind. Her phone buzzed again, and I snatched it before she could react. She lunged for it, but I held it out of her reach. Give it back, she shouted, her voice shrill. Oh, I will, I said, unlocking the screen and scrolling to the messages. Just as soon as I see what's so important. The latest text from Daniel was short, but it made my blood boil. Can't stop thinking about last night. Let's meet again tonight. Same place. I held the phone up for her to see. Care to explain this? Her face went pale, her bravado crumbling. Andrew, it's not what it looks like. Save it, I snapped, tossing the phone onto the counter. You're pathetic, Lily. Absolutely pathetic. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she'd done. She was crying because she knew she was losing. You want to know what happens now? I said, my voice steady but cold. I'm meeting with my lawyer this afternoon. The divorce papers are just the beginning. I'm filing for full ownership of this house. And I'm making damn sure you don't see a penny more than you deserve. Her tears turned to fury in an instant. You can't do that, she spat. You don't get to ruin my life just because you're bitter. Ruin your life? I laughed, shaking my head. You did that all on your own. I'm just making sure you don't ruin mine any further. She glared at me, her chest heaving, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. She knew she'd lost. Pack your things, Lily, I said, my tone final. You have until the end of the day. And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her to stew in the mess she'd created. By the time I returned from meeting my lawyer that afternoon, the house was eerily quiet. I half expected Lily to still be there, sulking in the kitchen or concocting some new plan to worm her way out of this mess. But when I stepped inside, I saw her bags lined up neatly by the front door. She was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, her face an unreadable mask. Gone was the fiery defiance from earlier. What sat in its place was a cold, detached calm that sent a chill through me. You're early, she said, her voice flat. And you're still here, I replied, setting my keys down. I needed time to think, she said, standing up slowly. About everything. I folded my arms, keeping my distance. And, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. You win, Andrew. I'll leave. I'll sign whatever papers you want. But before I go, I need to say something. I narrowed my eyes, wary of whatever game she was about to play. What could you possibly have left to say? She stepped closer, her tone soft, almost too soft. I don't want you to think that what I did was because of you. You're a good man, Andrew. You didn't deserve this. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, she admitted, her gaze dropping to the floor. But it's the truth. I made mistakes, huge ones, and now I'm paying for them. But part of me hoped, she trailed off, biting her lip. Hoped what? I demanded. She looked up, her eyes glassy. Hoped you'd still fight for us. The sheer audacity of her words made my stomach turn. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Fight for us? Lily, there hasn't been an us for a long time. You made sure of that. Her face crumpled for a brief moment before she quickly recovered, wiping away a stray tear. I know, she whispered. I just thought maybe… Don't. I interrupted, my voice firm. Don't stand there and act like you're the victim. You don't get to rewrite the story, Lily. You destroyed what we had, and now you're trying to paint yourself as the one who's hurting? It's insulting. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I was done sugarcoating the truth. There was a long, tense silence before she finally nodded, her expression hardening. Fine, she said quietly. If that's how you want it. It's how it is. I shot back. Without another word, she grabbed her bags and walked to the door. But just as she reached for the handle, She hesitated, glancing back at me over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Andrew," she said, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're better off without me, but you're not. You'll see." Her words were a final jab meant to cut deep, but they landed hollow. I stared at her, unflinching. "Get out, Lily." She held my gaze for a moment longer, as if daring me to call her back. When I didn't, she scoffed under her breath and yanked the door open, slamming it shut behind her. The house fell silent again, the weight of her absence sinking into the walls like a sigh of relief. I walked over to the window and watched as she loaded her bags into her car, her movements stiff with anger. As she drove off, I felt something unexpected. Peace. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the suffocating weight of suspicion or the sting of her lies. I felt free. But just as I turned away, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, half expecting another curveball. Instead, it was a message from Jake. "Saw her car leaving the house. You okay?" I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back, "Better than okay. Thanks for everything, man." And with that, I deleted the entire thread with Lily from my phone. Her number, her messages, her photos, all of it, gone. It was time to start over. Without her. The house was still for the first time in what felt like years. No footsteps pacing in the kitchen. No sound of Lily's voice on the phone, weaving lies into the air. Just silence. It was strange, almost unnerving, but also liberating. I sat down on the couch, letting the reality sink in. She was gone. It wasn't just the physical absence. It was the weight of her deceit, the constant paranoia, the second-guessing myself. All of it had been stripped away like a heavy coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, the cold bottle soothing in my hand as I stared at the divorce papers sitting on the coffee table. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a chapter of my life. And honestly, I was ready to turn the page. By the next morning, I had already started making changes. I spent hours cleaning the house, scrubbing away every trace of her. The bed linens went in the trash. The photos of us came down. Her old coffee mug, her favorite, was the first thing I smashed against the bottom of the trash can. By the afternoon, the house felt different. Lighter, like it was mine again. That night, Jake came over. He brought a six-pack and a pizza, and for the first time in months, I actually laughed. We sat on the back patio, the cold air biting but refreshing. "You handled it better than I thought you would," Jake said, taking a swig of his beer. I smirked, shaking my head. "You're just surprised I didn't set her car on fire." "Not gonna lie, the thought crossed my mind when you first called me," he said with a grin. "But seriously, man, I know it's been hell. You deserve a fresh start." I stared out at the yard, the wind rustling the trees. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I think I do." And that's exactly what I focused on. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding. Not just the house, but my life. I started running again, reconnecting with friends I'd pushed away during the chaos. I even booked a solo trip to the mountains. A week of hiking and breathing fresh air, far away from the mess Lily had left behind. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the anger crept back in, when the memories clawed at the edges of my mind. But every time, I reminded myself of one simple truth. I was better off. Then, about a month after she left, I got a text. From Lily. "I'm sorry. For everything. I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. Not from longing, but from sheer disbelief. I thought about replying, about telling her exactly what I thought of her half-hearted apology. But instead, I did something better. I deleted the message. No response. No closure for her. Just silence. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. As I sat there, my phone buzzing with notifications from friends instead of her, I realized something I hadn't before. I was free. Free to live a life without lies, without games, without her. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. And it felt damn good. Sometimes, life has a way of burning everything down to the ground so you can rebuild something better. That's exactly what I plan to do.